Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host Anthony Sassano and today's the 22nd of June 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So just wanted to, send a bit of appreciation out there today. I put out a tweet just before where I said, there are a few things in life that bring me as much joy as writing the Daily Gwei newsletter and recording a fresh episode of the Refuel every day. Just wanted to say thanks to everyone who reads and watches and supports my work. I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. And yeah, that's just kind of like a heartfelt thank you. Just randomly today, I was kind of thinking about it. Just a heartfelt thank you to everyone who supports me in all the work that I do. Honestly, like I try to do my best to spread as much of the good information about Ethereum as possible, try to educate all of you as much as possible, and the Daily Gwei is free because I believe that education should be free at the end of the day. I don't believe that I should put this behind like a paywall, or I should be kind of like serving ads or anything like that. I believe that everything that I do should kind of like remain free in terms of like educating people, right? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of like say thank you there. There's not really much else to it at the end of the day. I know a lot of you get like a lot of value out of my my show and my newsletter and all that good stuff, and even the Discord channel, which is something that I didn't mention in the tweet here. But the Discord channel is awesome. The community we have in there is absolutely awesome. So if you haven't joined yet, you can click the link in the YouTube description to join the channel, and you basically can ask any question about Ethereum and even just crypto generally and get it answered. We even have people that are accountants in there that can help you with tax-related questions depending on where you are in the world as well. So there's a lot that goes on in there too. And that's just kind of like an extension of kind of like the Daily Gwei itself, because I really did try to optimize the newsletter and my videos for the people who actually cared about the technology. And I didn't want to kind of like create like a trading channel or anything like that. Like, not that I really do any trading, but anything focused too heavily on price brings with it a lot of the quote-unquote moon boys, right? Not the people who are actually in it for the tech. And that's what I always like to focus on. So again, thank you everyone for supporting me. I hope you continue to support me as we go into the future, and obviously through the bear market as well. Like right now we're in a bear market, and pretty much most of you or all of you are still here that we're here in the bull market from the metrics that I've seen on my end, which is very, very cool to see. All right, on to the first bit of news. So Tim, Bico, published a blog post today detailing that Ropsten, Rinkeby, and Kiln will be deprecated. So these are the kind of like some of the public test nets on Ethereum right now. These are going to be deprecated pretty soon, and there's kind of like details about all of these here, leaving only the Gurley and Sepolia test nets kind of like to exist into the future. And those are the ones that will be maintained and be kind of like kept up to date, and those are the ones that will run through future protocol upgrades after the merge, of course. So if you do rely on these test nets, Ropsten, Rinkeby, and Kiln, just keep in mind that they will be deprecated at some point in the future, relatively soon actually, and you should move your activities over to Gurley or Sepolia. All right, so speaking of ETH core development here, Peter from the Geth team shared something that I think flew a little bit under the radar. So he shared this tweet where he said, "Our most significant feature since SnapSync, one of the holy grail problems of Geth, and street cred goes to Gary here. Take a peek at the below, quote unquote, he's emphasized full sync charts, Anon, and be amazed. With this, I could call Geth 1.x complete." So basically, this is kind of showing a faster sync time for a Geth full sync, not a snap sync, a full sync in, I believe, 3.5 days, which is really, really cool to see. And also, Peter kind of explains in the comments what we're actually seeing here, which is historical state pruning, aka the node will only ever store the amount of data it must. No more old stale junk piling on disk forever, needing a periodic resync to get the size back down. This is really, really cool because it means the, I guess, size of a full node collapses, and you can actually see it here, right, where kind of like the size of kind of like a full node has just collapsed, and it seems to be under 100 gig here rather than the, I think, almost 300 gig that it is kind of like today, which is very, very cool to see. So the funny thing about not the funny thing, I should say, the really good thing about the fact that we're going to be splitting the execution layer and the consensus layer into two different kind of like modular entities once we merge, and then we have the clients working on either side of them, specializing in the consensus or specializing in the execution, is the fact that we get improvements like this. These are the things that are worked on once a lot of the other core kind of like work work is done, right? Where I guess like a lot of the hard forks, a lot of the network upgrades, stuff like that is done. This is what core devs work on, while that other stuff is maybe in research phase and they don't have to kind of like code it up or anything like that. They work on this sort of stuff, which is actually part of, I guess, the Ethereum roadmap too. Like historical state pruning and things like that are definitely part of it, the Ethereum roadmap, making it easier to sync Ethereum and to kind of like validate the chain. So this is really cool. I think it was just kind of like understated because it is quite technical, but this means that more people in more places will be able to run Ethereum full nodes and do a full sync and in a much faster time as well. Like as I said, 3.5 days rather than I think the week plus it was taking before, which is obviously a consequence of that database size being reduced due to this historical state pruning, which is very, very cool to see. All right, so MetaMask had an announcement where they said in a tweet, "We're soon rolling out a monumentally improved flow for buying crypto within MetaMask. That's going to be including the best rates, faster than ever, a layer 2 on-ramp to Arbitrum and Optimism, and automatic provider selection across Transact, Sendwire, and MoonPay." So this is basically going to be an one of the major features here is basically going to be a fiat on-ramp into Arbitrum and Optimism through the most popular crypto wallet, MetaMask, which is obviously a very, very big deal. MetaMask has had their swap feature for quite a while now that allows you to swap between different kind of like cryptos and things like that. But being able to basically do a layer 2 on-ramp to Arbitrum and Optimism directly from in MetaMask from one of these fiat providers such as Wire, MoonPay, and Transact, or fiat payment providers is a game changer, I think. And it's going to get a lot of people to, I guess, like on board onto layer 2, basically bypassing layer 1 altogether, which is really, really awesome. And I've discussed this before, but what I find funny is that people will use these tools to get around layer 1 gas fees, but depending on the size that they use them for, they're going to end up paying more in the kind of like fiat on-ramp fees or fiat provider fees than they would in gas fees. So just as an example here, say that the fee is like 1 or 2%. Now, obviously, if you're onboarding with just $100, that's only $1 or $2. That's obviously much cheaper than it would be if you were to bridge in directly from layer 1, on top of the fee that you already pay if you're onboarding onto layer 1 through one of these places, right? Even centralized exchanges take fees like that on the normal kind of like buy flow that they have there. So, but then when you get into like the larger territory, say you're going into like the $10,000 purchase territory, right? And you're like, oh, I don't want to pay gas fees. Well, 1% of $10,000 is $100, right? Like the gas fees to onboard onto layer 2 is nowhere near that. Like even at the higher gas prices, even like some of the highest, it was maybe 20 or $30 or something like that. So it still would be cheaper for you to just directly onboard. But again, if you are coming directly from, I guess, kind of like the going from like fiat directly to directly to layer 1 and then layer 2, you would still have to pay those fees anyway. So that difference is strictly for people who have existing assets on the network or something like that. It doesn't make sense to kind of just go buy new assets because you don't want to pay the gas fees, when in reality, it depends on the size, and that's kind of like where it I think makes the most sense. So there's that to consider. But I think for a lot of users, especially newer ones, this is going to be great because it means they only have to pay that fiat on-ramp fee. They don't have to pay any gas fees, and they can just skip Ethereum layer 1 entirely, which is what we want people to be doing. Funny enough, we want them to be going straight to layer 2. So I'm really awesome to see that MetaMask is going to be rolling out these features relatively soon, I think. All right, so speaking of Arbitrum, the Arbitrum Odyssey 8-week-long journey has begun today. So if you want details on what Odyssey is all about and how to participate, there's this thread here from Arbitrum for you to kind of have a look at. Now, I'm super excited for this because I think this is the first real, I guess, like non-liquidity mining initiative for a layer 2 or an Ethereum scalability solution. Obviously, the Polygon POS chain had their liquidity mining for a while, and they've had a few different kind of like things going on there as well. But I think in terms of out of all the scalability solutions on Ethereum, I think this Arbitrum Odyssey is the first one to be this big at this scale without kind of like liquidity mining, because obviously Arbitrum doesn't have a token right now. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. I'm curious to see how many people actually onboard. Obviously, because Arbitrum doesn't have a token, people are going to be onboarding to speculate if they're going to get an airdrop and things like that. But that's totally fine. Arbitrum knows this, but it's just like a thing to get more people onboarded, more people to use Arbitrum, to experience it, to experience the Arbitrum ecosystem, and to also use a lot of these bridging protocols too. It's actually funny. I didn't realize how many bridges there are now. Like, look at this. This is not even all of them, I would assume. Like, there's a lot of bridges right now, guys. And Honestly, I don't think most of the bridges are going to survive. I really think there's only going to be a handful of them, but it's fun to kind of like see which ones people use. And there's actually a tweet here that shows that one of the most used ones is Hop right now. So 4,000 new users have so far bridged into Arbitrum, and you can see kind of like the spike there with 2,800 using Hop alone. And the funny thing is that they're not using Hop to get an airdrop because Hop is already, the airdrop's already done. Now, I don't know if Hop has liquidity mining on right now. I haven't looked into that yet, but yeah, I still think there's going to be like just a handful of winners in the bridge space. As bullish as I am on bridges generally, especially between layer 2s, I don't think there's room for like 10, 15, 20 different bridging protocols. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. So there will be a handful of them that win big, but it's interesting to see that there's already so many competing for that market share. But yeah, anyway, you can read this thread to get a breakdown of what's happening and what you can do to get involved there. And I'm going to be paying attention to other metrics such as the number of transactions, the fees paid, the number of obviously new users, people like what they're actually using on this chain. Because I really want to just monitor this and see how this goes, because I think this can be a blueprint, or I guess like a template for other layer 2 ecosystems to copy once they're in the position to do so, especially the ones that don't have a token yet. Because I think when you have a token, it muddies the waters. But at the same time, as I said, not having a token muddies the waters too, because people expect an airdrop. But I don't know if there's going to be an airdrop with this. I don't know if this is going to account for an airdrop at all, but people will obviously speculate. There's nothing wrong with that. The Arbitrum team will definitely expect this, but still, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't kind of like do initiatives like this. So I'm very glad to see that Arbitrum Odyssey has kicked off today. All right, so speaking of big announcements, Uniswap Labs announced today that they have acquired Genie XYZ, or Genie here, which is an NFT marketplace aggregator. So this is apparently the first marketplace aggregator, and Uniswap is going to be expanding their products to include both ERC20s and NFTs. Starting this fall, you'll be able to buy and sell NFTs directly on the Uniswap web app, and we'll integrate NFTs into our developer APIs and widgets, making Uniswap a comprehensive platform for users and builders in Web3. So this is quite interesting because there is a discussion right now that talks about aggregators of NFTs versus just the standalone marketplaces. Obviously, you have the OpenSea standalone marketplace, you have kind of like LooksRare, and you have a bunch of others out there. And then you have the aggregators like Genie, and then there's a couple of others out there. And people are discussing like, okay, is it going to be the aggregators that win it all, or is it going to be the standalone products? And we can look at decentralized exchanges and the aggregators in that space to get a rough idea. The funny thing is that Uniswap still dominates in volume, even though we have lots of aggregators like Matcha and 1inch and things like that. Uniswap has such a strong brand name and such a strong kind of like awareness around it. People just default to using that instead of going through an aggregator, even though going through an aggregator might most of the time get them a better price. And we've even seen that people will use MetaMask swap feature when they can get like a much better price on kind of like just going Uniswap directly or one of these other dexes directly. So with the NFT space, it might be a bit different because of the fact that, they're by definition, they're not fungible, right? So they might be kind of like something listed on one marketplace that's not listed on another. So, and this is kind of like just one advantage of an aggregator, and then the aggregator will bring that together. For example, someone might have listed an NFT on OpenSea, but they haven't listed it on LooksRare. Well, it's not like you can just go to LooksRare and get it because it's not listed there. Just like, for example, if you go to Uniswap and trade like ETH on there, obviously ETH is on Uniswap, and then you go to another decentralized exchange, ETH's there as well. The liquidity profile may differ, and it normally does, but it's not like it's not there at all. Whereas with NFTs, if it's listed on OpenSea and not listed on LooksRare, you just literally can't buy it on LooksRare. You have to go to OpenSea to buy it. Whereas with an aggregator, it'll show you everywhere that this NFT is listed, and then you'll just be able to kind of like easily find it and buy it there. So I actually think the NFT aggregator will long-term win out over the standalones, but I'm not convinced on decentralized exchange aggregators. I think that they will probably not win out or not win as big as a market share as people think they will. But it remains to be seen. We're still early days here. Probably not worth making any kind of like long-term bets. But from the history that we've seen so far, it seems that at least within the decentralized exchange space, aggregators don't really do much. Aggregators don't really have much market share compared to the standalones. But I think that's different for the NFT ecosystem. So we're going to have to see how that plays out for sure there. All right, so another victim of Three Arrows Capital today was revealed. So Voyager apparently has $663 million worth of exposure to 3AC through USDC and BTC that they lent out to the fund here. So Voyager only has $152 million in cash and owned crypto assets on hand, which, as it says here, is not great because that means they're insolvent, basically, right? Like they have this massive debt owing to them, and then they only have a small bit of, cash in crypto compared to that debt. So not looking great at all. I'm not sure how 3AC is going to pay everyone back. I don't think they will be able to pay everyone back, depending on how much they can liquidate, where they can find money from. The way that they were selling assets on chain screams to me that they don't actually have as much money as they need to pay back those debts because they just got so blown up. And apparently SBF from Alameda/FTX has come to the rescue of Voyager so far and has done the same deal or a similar deal that he did with BlockFi with them. So maybe Voyager will be saved by SBF. I mean, it's kind of concerning how many things the SBF is scooping up right now, because you could argue that he was in part responsible for these things kind of like crashing as well, because he owns the exchange. It's a perpetual exchange. He's addicted to shorting as well. He loves shorting. And it's a leverage exchange too. So there are arguments to be made either way, but it's a bit concerning that he's coming in and he's pretty much like one of the only, I guess, big liquid players left right now, and he's scooping things up for cheap. So we're going to have to see long-term how that plays out. You guys know my opinion on SBF. I've explained it before. Had that whole kind of like arena, so I'm not going to harp on about that. But Three Arrows Capital is very much finished, very much done. People are saying, oh, there's going to be a redemption arc. I'm like, guys, like, what redemption arc? Like, if anyone still gives these guys money, they're just absolutely beyond stupid. And to be fair, like, they could probably find people that are stupid enough to give these guys money again, but I don't think CT would welcome them back with open arms. Like, maybe they would. Maybe CT is dumb enough to do that. I've seen CT welcome back other people with open arms, such as Arthur Hayes. And for those of you who weren't around pre-2020, Arthur Hayes was pretty bad for the space with BitMEX. BitMEX traded against their own customers. They did a lot of the similar things that we see in other ecosystems today, and now people kind of like worship Arthur Hayes. I don't know, like, guys, like, I'm not into kind of like getting onto the personal level of these things for today, but I think that it's just funny whenever you kind of like see people say things like, how are they going to come back from this? And then they somehow do. Like, some people just have that thing, right? Some people can just like survive anything, it seems. But we'll have to see how it shakes out. Obviously, Sue and Kyle from 3AC have not tweeted, I think, since the news broke that they were kind of like having troubles. But we'll have to see what how they go going forward. All right, so in other NFT news, eBay has actually acquired an NFT marketplace called KnownOrigin. Now, this is one of the less popular NFT marketplaces, I believe, but still has been out there for quite a while. And this, I think the big news here is obviously that eBay is getting involved with acquiring NFT companies. And I remember I said the other week that there's still a lot of liquid players in crypto, or a handful of liquid players in crypto, such as A16Z and Paradigm. But what I didn't mention is that there's also liquid players outside of crypto that are looking at all these kind of like things now and being like, wow, I can pick these things up for a lot cheaper than I could have, previously when there was a mania. And I think that's a lot of that's happening right now. I think it's happening in both the M&As in the kind of like private market space like this, and it's probably happening on the public markets. We've already seen a few kind of like assets start to go up a little bit. But, who knows from there? It's very hard to track these sorts of things. But anyone who's liquid right now and doesn't have any debts or anything like that is in a very good position to scoop up things at a very, very nice price. And I'm sure that they're taking advantage of it. And that seems to be what eBay's doing. Obviously, eBay's absolutely massive, and the fact that they're getting involved with NFTs is kind of like very curious. And KnownOrigin, as I said, is one of the less popular NFT marketplaces, but maybe eBay can do something with them to get them to compete with something like OpenSea. We'll have to wait and see. All right, so Tether announced today they're launching a British pound pegged stablecoin. Now, this is funny because Tether already has a euro stablecoin. I mentioned that the other day when Circle came out with the news that they're doing a euro stablecoin. So I wonder if the next step for Circle is to do a British pound stablecoin as well. But Tether's making, I guess, like the first move here. And I've got the same thoughts with this as I had with the Euro coin, where I'm not convinced it's going to be that big. Again, if anyone can pull it off, it's probably Tether. I think Tether and Circle are the only two companies in crypto that could pull off stablecoins, other than the, I guess, like USD stablecoins, because they have such a deep network and they have so many connections and they just know the playbook basically and how to do this. But at the same time, I'm just not convinced there's that much demand, especially for something like Euro. Like I kind of mentioned last week how I think that the demand for Euro is just probably not there. Like Europe is not in a great place right now, and as a result, their currency is not in a great place. And even though the US dollar is inflating so much, it's still the strongest fiat currency out there. And you never want to be in the weakest fiat currency as a consumer. A lot of the time, maybe as a trader, it's different, but as a consumer, you don't really want to kind of like be in that. And yeah, it depends on kind of like what the countries do with these coins as well. But the countries aren't using the stable coins; they're using the actual kind of like fiat. So we'll have to see. But just another stable coin, I guess, like entering another non-USD stable coin entering the markets soon, I think. All right, so Swell Network announced today that they're launching their testnet. So the Swell Network DAO is pleased to publicly announce the launch of Swell V2 testnet on the Gurley network. This is a critical milestone in the development of Swell's next-gen ETH liquid staking design. So you can check it out here, all the details about this in this blog post here. Disclosure, I'm an investor advisor to Swell. Just want to get that out there. But I've been talking about them for a little while now and about how they're another, I guess, like a staking service provider that's coming into the fray. They're trying to be a decentralized staking service provider, so similar to kind of like Rocket Pool. And I definitely think it's a positive that we have just more competition here. Like I said to you guys, like at the end of the day, the way to kill something like Lido's dominance is with more competition, and then all the other things that I've mentioned in the past as well when it comes to that. So if you're interested in getting involved with the testnet here, you can read this blog post and join the Discord to get more details on this, but good to see this kind of like being live here. All right, so speaking of Lido, they announced today that the expansion of the Node Operator Set on Ethereum, welcoming a bunch of teams here. So I think I covered this maybe a few weeks ago when this was just a forum blog post, but now it's official. So there's a bunch of teams joining as node operators, such as ChainSafe, Nethermind, Prylabs, Sigma Prime, and a bunch of others here. I won't read them all out, which brings, I think, the node operator set to 29 on Lido, up from 21. So obviously they're going to keep adding more node operators over time. And obviously this cohort is very strong. This Nethermind, ChainSafe, Prylabs, and Sigma, they're all core developing teams, right? Like they're all very much you're very, very heavily involved with Ethereum. So with Ethereum staking, I should say. So cool to see that. But the funny thing is with Lido, it's such a, I guess, maybe sensitive topic to talk about these days, especially in the Ethereum staking community. And I totally get it. Like, I think when the announcement that people like Nethermind and Prylabs and Sigma and ChainSafe were being onboarded onto Lido, some people didn't like this. Some people really were like, well, isn't this kind of like getting into bed with the enemy? Because some people do consider Lido to be the enemy. And I totally can kind of see that view, depending on, I guess, like who you ask and depending on how you view them. But my view on it is that these core teams, like, because of the fact that they don't have their own token or anything like that, because they came much later to Ethereum, they didn't get to basically have all that ETH when ETH was like a much kind of like lower price, the ETH from the original sale and anything like that. They need to kind of like generate funding in any way that they can. And this is another avenue for them to do that. They can set up their own nodes, they can get people staking with them, and they can take a cut, and then it goes to further fund Ethereum core development. So I think that's a positive that potentially offsets any of the negatives of them being involved kind of like with Lido, because people say, oh, well, they're lending more legitimacy to Lido, all these sorts of stuff. And look, at the end of the day, I go back to my original kind of points around it where I said that the more competition for Lido, the better. And we kind of like do have to wait until withdrawals are enabled to kind of like see the end state of the beacon chain. But I really do appreciate people who always are bringing up things like, bringing up kind of like concerns and bringing them up publicly rather than keeping them in kind of like in private. Because at the end of the day, the only way that the Ethereum ecosystem and especially the beacon chain gets stronger is if we kind of like air our dirty laundry, so to speak, and make sure that everyone's across it and make sure that we all work towards a better, I guess, like staking ecosystem for everyone. And I know there's a few key people in that. Obviously, I talk about Superfizz a lot on the Refuel because he's just very, very involved with that. But the ETH Staker crew, the Rocket Pool crew, the ones who have been around for a while and really want to push decentralized staking forward, like, I really respect them. I really, really do. And I respect them calling out these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, you guys know my view on all of it. I'm taking a more neutral approach. I'm trying not to go too far into one direction or another. But at the end of the day, I'm a decentralization maximalist. I want the most decentralized staking service providers to win. Ideally, I want staking service providers to be so decentralized that they have absolutely no control over any of the user assets, and they may have marginally more risk than just solo staking. I mean, at the end of the day, everything's probably going to have more risk than solo staking, and everything's going to have maybe more trust assumptions than solo staking, but we can probably get to a point where we get close enough that we can help those people who don't have the 32 ETH and can't afford to have the 32 ETH to stake. We can help them to solo stake, because at the end of the day, we don't want the Ethereum beacon chain just looking like a depos chain where where there's just like a few people kind of like controlling the chain, or a few large entities being in control of most of the stake. At the end of the day, that's not what we want. That's what we're working against, and we're trying to work towards a more decentralized future when it comes to the beacon chain. So I'm always going to support that. I'm always going to support everything that kind of like goes towards that. But I think that at the end of the day, Lido exists, Coinbase staking exists, Kraken staking exists, other centralized staking providers exist, decentralized options exist. There's going to be a wide spectrum of kind of like staking providers that people can choose from, and it's up to them what they want to kind of go with. And we do need to make staking easier overall as well. That's another major thing that I think people miss, is that the UI and UX of staking right now, especially staking on your own, is very, very difficult when compared to the staking provided by something like a Lido or something like a centralized exchange. We do need to bring those barriers down, because then we can't really blame especially the newer users for going with these easier to use solutions, because they may feel, I guess, like overwhelmed and be like, well, I'm not going to just go through all these hoops to stake or to solo stake or to do anything. I'm just going to stake here. And they might just eat the fees because it's just not worth their time to go through all the motions. So I think there are plenty of solutions already for things like this, like DApp Node and stuff like that. But we need more. We need more. And there was that kind of like CLR round from the kind of like ETH Staker crew a few weeks ago that I spoke about. That's working towards making it easier. And we'll get there. But yeah, it's an effort, right? It definitely is an effort. It's an effort that we have to keep pushing, and I'll definitely be on the side to pushing us as much as possible towards decentralized staking providers and options rather than the centralized ones. All right, so finally here, I want to talk about a little tweet I put out today where I said almost all layer 1 blockchains are either forks of the Ethereum codebase, or they end up living long enough to see themselves become like Ethereum. So the most popular chains out there today in terms of usage, other than Ethereum, and I mean, they're not that popular anymore, but during, I guess, like the bull market, there was BSC, which is still kind of like has a user base mostly in kind of Southeast Asia from what I can see. But there's BSC, which is basically Ethereum with a bunch of parameters tuned up and basically a centralized version of Ethereum. There was the Avalanche C chain, there's Phantom, there's a bunch of others out there, like Tron and things like that. And then there are the non-EVM compatible chains, or the non-kind of like Ethereum fork chains, such as like, Cardano and Solana and, Tezos and a bunch of others like that. But the thing is that they're eventually going to just look like Ethereum anyway, because I think that there's only really maybe one or two optimal designs for a blockchain, and really maybe only one that we're slowly working towards as an ecosystem. And I think Ethereum is just years ahead of every other ecosystem to get towards getting there. Things like, the layer 2, the rollup ecosystem, things like historical and state pruning, things like proto-dank sharding, things like validity proofs and stuff like that. Like, that's all coming from Ethereum. Now, some of the other ecosystems have actually kind of like pivoted to this. Like Tezos, for example, is doing the rollup-centric roadmap, except they're using enshrined rollups instead of the rollups that we are using on Ethereum. Then you have something like a Solana, which obviously looks very, very different to Ethereum, but they had problems with congestion control and the network would be unstable and fall over. Well, now they're implementing a fee market. The fee market isn't exactly the same as Ethereum. They're doing a fee market where they can kind of like target different transaction types and kind of like attach different fee markets to that, which has been discussed in Ethereum as well as part of the multi-dimensional EIP 1559 and also proto-dank sharding, which kind of proposes a separate fee market for call data. But they're implementing a fee market to do that. So that, it's just looking more and more like Ethereum. They're also kind of like softening up to rollups. Same with Avalanche, right? They had the C chain, which is EVM compatible. Then they have their subnets, which are side chains. But then they're also saying, after fudding a lot, that they want to do layer 2s and rollups as well. So I think eventually it might take a while still because there's a lot of money in just making bullshit layer 1s, but eventually we're going to coalesce around a grand design of how a blockchain should look like, at least a smart contract chain. I'm not including Bitcoin in this because it's a separate thing, but like a smart contract chain. And really, I think it's just going to be Ethereum. Like, honestly, Ethereum is already kind of like working towards it. It's very, very far along. It has the network effect. It has the user base. It has this strong social layer as well. And it has a clear path to getting there. The other ones are just going to play catch up. It depends. I don't think there's going to be many layer 1 winners. I think Ethereum is going to be the biggest winner. And then there might be one or two others that kind of are smaller winners. But when it comes to market share, I think the layer 2s are going to take a lot of the market share as well. They're pretty much going to obsolete most of the other layer 1s based on just technical merits alone. So when you think about it and really run through it and kind of think maybe 5 to 10 years out, it's impossible not to imagine a scenario where it's literally just like Ethereum layer 2s, maybe one or two other layer 1s that have some market share, and then a bunch of like dead and zombified layer 1s that never went anywhere, right? Like, even like, I don't want to FUD the other layer 1s too hard. Like, I'm not trying to be an ETH maxi, but like, just from a pure technical standpoint, Ethereum to me looks like the best design for a blockchain. Now, it may not be, and I'm glad we have other ecosystems experimenting with other designs, but I have not seen anything in these other ecosystems that look completely different to Ethereum and that actually work. Like, as I said, Solana looks very different to Ethereum, but it doesn't actually work. Like, to get it to work, they need to implement a fee market, right? For example, that is going against everything that they said, that they were going to keep the fees lower. By implementing the fee market, the fees are going to go up because when congestion kind of like goes up, when people want to use the chain, fees go up to compensate for that. And that's to stop the chain from falling over. And that's exactly the reason why Ethereum doesn't allow unlimited transactions, or one of the reasons. The other reason is we want to preserve decentralization. But, all these kind of like shortcuts that other chains have taken are going to just get walked back, or they're going to get substantially chained. And I think Solana in a couple of years, and I keep talking about Solana because I think that's the most well-known and most kind of like popular non-EVM chain. I think in a couple of years, Solana is going to look very, very different to what it looks like today and what it looked like even just last year. And it's just going to look a lot more like Ethereum. And I just don't see a world where it's going to usurp Ethereum or take over Ethereum. It may survive because it has a lot of backing behind it, but I really do feel like Ethereum's layer 2 ecosystem will just fare a lot better than what Solana is trying to do, unless Solana ends up looking more like a settlement layer than an execution layer, and then it becomes a whole different kind of like kettle of fish there, right? So anyway, something to think about that you guys might want to talk about as well on the Discord channel. Be sure to hit me up there about it. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.